Hey everyone. In this video lecture, we'll focus on concision, the second of our 4C style principles in this class. We'll focus on three main topics in this video lecture. First, we'll define our terms. We'll talk about what the word concision actually refers to. Next, we'll discuss some tips for writing concisely. And finally, we'll talk about how you can put these tips to work in your writing. So let's start by defining our terms. Once again, the most important thing to note is that our main style principles for this week, clarity and concision, are primarily useful for enhancing your writing at the sentence level. They don't help you build links between sentences. They don't help enhance the flow of your writing. They don't help you write better structured paragraphs or documents, but they do enhance your writing at that most foundational level, the level of the sentence. Now, clarity, as we discussed previously, helps make your sentences easier to read and understand. Concision, on the other hand, these principles make your sentences feel shorter. And the operative word here is feel. Many of these principles can help you reduce the word count of your writing, but more importantly, they make your sentences easy to read and understand quickly, and therefore make your writing feel shorter. So now let's talk about some tips for writing concisely. And here, the important thing to note is that concision is not solely or even primarily about minimizing word count. It's about making your writing easy to read quickly. We can achieve this by following a relatively small handful of tips and techniques. First, we want to follow the clarity tips for this class. That's right, clarity is a twofer. It not only helps make your sentences easier to read and understand, it also makes your writing feel more concise. Second, you want to keep your sentences short. Third, you want to minimize modifiers. Fourth, you want to eliminate redundant language. And finally, you want to avoid evasive or obvious statements. So let's start with our first tip: follow the clarity tips from this class. So as I suggested earlier, clarity is a twofer. It is not only valuable in its own right, it's also the secret to concision. If you make your message clear, if you make your sentences clear, they will feel short. Your reader will be able to navigate them quickly and easily. Second tip, keep your sentences short. Long sentences slow your reader down. So it's a good rule of thumb that if your sentence is 2 lines or longer, chop it up into multiple sentences. Now, this tip, to be clear, will not necessarily reduce your word count. A document with a ton of short sentences can be just as long as a document with a smaller number of longer sentences. But the operative thing here is that short sentences are easier to read and navigate quickly, and they therefore feel shorter than longer sentences. Next tip, minimize modifiers. You can do this in a variety of ways. So first, you can omit amplifiers like very or really. You can also reduce the number of other modifiers that you use. And the two main categories of modifiers are, of course, adjectives, words that modify nouns, and adverbs, which are words that modify verbs and typically end in ly. Modifiers are a problem for a couple different reasons. First of all, amplifiers are just intrinsically unconvincing. Nobody's ever been persuaded by a statement because somebody said their product is really great instead of just great. Amplifiers, they don't add much to your writing. They expand your word count and they don't make it more effective. And additionally, readers just grow numb if you are constantly bombarding them with adjectives and adverbs. Adjectives and adverbs are a necessary and important part of writing, but you don't want to overuse them. Think about them like a very potent spice. Just use them only where needed. You don't want it to overwhelm the flavor of your sentence or document. Next tip, eliminate redundant language. And redundant language can, of course, take a variety of forms, but two of the most common that I want to emphasize here are redundant pairs and redundant modifiers. Redundant pairs are phrases like first and foremost, each and every, any and all, basic and fundamental. And redundant modifiers are phrases like future plans, completely finish, end result, each individual, or important essentials. And these common forms of redundant language are a problem because they're just unnecessary. First and foremost mean the same thing. There's no point for you to repeat that concept using two different words. And in redundant modifiers, the modifier means the same thing as the noun it modifies, right? Plans necessarily occur in the future, so you don't need to say future plans. To finish something is to complete it. So saying completely finish is unnecessary. And therefore, to fix this problem, it's actually quite easy. In redundant pairs, you just eliminate one half of the pair. And in redundant modifiers, you eliminate the modifier and just leave the noun. It's that simple. Redundant language is a problem, as we suggested before, because it's pointless, right? Things that are redundant literally don't need to be there. And there are also problems because many of these common issues, they sound pompous. They sound overwrought and flowery. Keep your language simple, direct, plain, and conversational. Now, our final tip. Avoid evasive or obvious statements. Evasive and obvious statements, like redundant language, can take a variety of forms, but the two that I want to emphasize here are hedging and meta-discourse. Hedging is when you qualify or downgrade an otherwise definitive statement. Hedging most commonly takes the form of phrases like I think, I feel, or I believe. And it's a problem because it's wasteful and it makes you sound less confident. It's wasteful because typically it's clear to your audience that whatever it is that you're saying is either a wish or a thought or an opinion. You don't need to state that. That's perfectly clear even without that statement. And it makes you sound less confident because you're taking an affirmative statement and you're qualifying it. Instead of saying all cats are wonderful, which is of course an objectively true statement, if I were to downgrade that by saying I believe all cats are wonderful, right? That's just a weaker statement. So whenever possible, scrub your language of those hedging phrases and stand confident in your statement. Meta-discourse, on the other hand, is writing about writing or speaking about speaking. The most common forms of meta-discourse are phrases like, I'm writing to inform you that, blah, blah, blah. Meta-discourse is a problem because writing about writing restates the obvious. If you're writing to me to invite me to a meeting, that's obviously the purpose of your message. You don't need to tell me that that's the purpose of your message. Just scrub it out altogether, all right? So with both hedging and meta-discourse, get rid of it. You don't need it. Finally, let's close out this video lecture by talking about how we can put these tips to work. And the main thing to emphasize here is that, once again, these style principles, they're guides, not rules, okay? You should generally follow these guidelines. But if you choose to violate them, or if it makes sense to violate them, it's not like you're breaking some fundamental, quote-unquote, objective rule of the English language. Writing, as we've said many times, is about choices. And you should only use these style principles when they're better than the alternative. All right? So think critically about the best way to achieve your goals in writing and follow these only when it makes sense to do so. And with that, we are at the end of yet another video lecture. Once again, thanks for watching.